I'm Gemma and this is a chat with Gemma. So I've been away from doing videos for a while. Part of the reason was because the last couple of videos I did were not viewed by very many people. And so I was kind of, tossing around that idea of will I keep going, because, there's not much point in doing something that's not productive. Also, the other reason I haven't been making videos is because I was pretty occupied. My father was getting closer and closer and closer to death. He finally died in late February, and we've had his funeral just under a fortnight ago, I suppose. And so that was a very, very difficult time. He went through a lot, and that was very difficult. I was having panic attacks, and sometimes it was literally unbearable. Just the emotion and the sadness and all of that. And I've just been to Dad's house now, and I've to collect some things, and practically had a nervous breakdown. It's just, I think, there are times when I'm just normal, just the same as ever before, and then there are times when I'm just not exactly happy. I'm sort of, it's like there's something just slightly wrong with you. And then there are times when, as I say, it's very hard to bear, if not unbearable. And, it just seems so cruel when people are at a great age, and then life presents them with pain, accidents, sickness, or whatever it might be, and they've got to go through it in an old body. It just seems so cruel. But Dad got to his real home in the end, so he's there now, thank God. So I don't have to worry about him anymore, but I do have to worry about me. The reason I started doing these videos was because I've always wanted to try to find a way to help people who are lonely. So as anybody who's sort of been with me from the beginning knows, I've done 3 different kinds of videos. And so I've gone from being, trying to be a helper to being a helpee. So I've needed help myself lately, and I've chased that, and that's what I would recommend. And so I want to talk about something that's very, very personal and is not really suitable for young people, children, or probably teenagers. Just to maybe clear the room if you've got anybody like that. So there are people who are suicidal, and I'm not one of those, and I've never really been one of those, I don't think. But I have, at different times of my life, have what I've found out is called a death wish. So what's a death wish, Gemma? Well, in my case, because I've read about it, I know that suicide does not solve your problem. People can be worse off after they commit suicide because we don't end. We don't just stop being. So yes, we're trapped in life, folks. Yes, we are prisoners of God. St. Paul said he was a prisoner of God, didn't he? But he was in a cell. But we are prisoners in life in some ways, some of us who don't necessarily always enjoy life. So if you have a death wish, it doesn't mean that every minute of every day you're wanting to die, but you're wanting to just basically leave this earth and go to heaven is what you want to do. You want to go and be with God, be where there's none of this painful stuff, annoying stuff, you know what I mean, all the rotten stuff, the awful stuff, the horrifying stuff that goes with life on this earth. For example, why do I always have little spiders in my bed? You know, it's enough to drive you crazy. So you know what I mean. And people like me know enough about spiritual matters, and we know enough about the afterlife to not consider, plan for, actively go and sort of start putting into motion the act of suicide. And also people like me have families that we love, and we really don't want to give those people distress. So again, there's been times in my life when I've like, God, I'm trapped here, trapped in this life. And that's how I feel sometimes. And so I literally go through sort of claustrophobic feelings sometimes. So the reason I'm talking about this, and I know it's a very down topic, and I'm not trying to bring people down, I'm trying to talk about something to get it more perhaps understood, and other people who might watch this, if anybody does, might think, yeah, I think I might have something like that too, and then we'll think about at least getting prayer about it. Or, if you're not a praying person, go and get some psychological help, psychiatric help, psychological help, some sort of good quality counselling. And counselling can vary. There's a lot of people who have tried counselling and it hasn't really worked for them. And I think that's because they had the wrong person. And also I think that counselling does have its limits. For example, if you have a person who's, afraid to leave the house, and they won't ever actually walk as far as across the front threshold, then it doesn't matter how much counselling they have, they're just determined not to do that. So you see what I mean? There's times when it's not going to, the person has to cooperate with the counselling. And, life does not always feel good. And so you can see a lot of things happening in life where other people are suffering, that bothers you, and you have some bad things that have happened to you that, are giving you suffering. And so you know there's a God, there's a heaven, and you just want to go there now. And, somebody like me who, I've just seen off my father. 4 or 5 years before that, I saw off my mother. I don't have a spouse, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, like some people my age do. And, have gone through a lot of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, that sort of thing. For me, it's like, okay, well, God, I think it's time for me to go too now. Don't need to be sick, don't need to have some terrible violence. I think I'll just leave my body and come home if it's all right with you, God. Any minute now. When you're ready, God. So that's kind of how I think. And then at times I forget all about it and I'm involved in something I'm enjoying doing, or, watching something that I'm enthralled in. And as I say, have these ordinary times. But certainly lately I've been through, I would say, as bad a time as I've ever been in my life. Why didn't I go through that with Mum? Mum didn't take as long to die in a way. It was quite quick. But with Dad, it was like really, really dragged out. And I was just so keen to do everything I could to prevent him from suffering physically or emotionally. But you can't do it. You might want to do it, but you would literally have to be there every minute. And sometimes you are there and you can't solve what they're going through, much as you would want to. So it was really hard, really, really hard. And so it took me back to those times, as I've talked about in other videos, where I had nervous breakdowns and, I had panic attacks and the like. And, you could call it flashbacks if you want, but I was back there. And, if it's not unbearable, gee, it's close to it. It's so hard. And if you're going through something like that, or you have gone through that, you've got my sympathy. And there are a lot of other people in the world, I can tell you, because I've talked to a lot of other people about this. And people have had all kinds of experiences far worse than mine. So, there are a lot of people, not just me, who give you sympathy. And, I wish that nobody in the world ever had to go through anything like that. But I know they do. And I have no idea how some people get through some of the things that they get through. It's just, I think they're just, people say, oh, God doesn't let you have anything that you can't bear. Really? I don't know that that's true. I think there are some things that are, as I say, things that I've found were unbearable, or, at least a hair's breadth from being unbearable anyway. It's just so hard. And so I wanted to talk to you about how we, I think, never really learn to process death. I'm 70 and like, why don't you know how to do this, Gemma? Well, I don't know that our minds are really made to process it properly. I don't know, perhaps humans weren't really designed for death in the beginning. But at times my mind was like swirling with lots of different emotions and thought processes and things. And it was like going mad, I was like, it just couldn't process all these things, and I didn't know what things there were swirling around to even try to process them. One of the things I went through was I was getting sad about people who died long ago, and I was over their death a long time ago, and sort of driving through an area where I used to be with them, or, just saw something of theirs or whatever, and all of a sudden I was sad about that again. So it's like all your nerves, it's like your skin's been taken off, figuratively speaking, and your nerves are kind of just out there dangling. Cat on a hot tin roof, everything just is getting to you. And as I've been told during this time, you know, you have to allow this process of grieving. You can't be making big decisions and doing anything particularly stressful at this time. You have to kind of make a little cave for yourself, so to speak, and get in it. And even sometimes the people that would normally give you comfort, I don't know what it is, but at these times they suddenly they just don't. They can you need to stay away from them because they make things worse for you. I don't know, it's just the way Satan works in this world, I think. It's when he sees an opportunity, he will use it to do bad. And does God show himself? Yeah, God shows himself in little things here and there and coincidences and things like that. But, you know, does it just solve everything? Probably not. You're still going to feel bad, you know. So the passing of time too is another thing. Do I ever get used to? You might say, "Oh, don't you want to get to heaven?" You know, and yes, having this, whatever you want to call it, this thought process, condition, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, there've been times that's another day I've got through. There's another day closer to heaven. Again, sorry if that, you know, if I'm bringing people down, but sometimes we need to kind of acknowledge these things, bring them out into the open so people can maybe recognise things in themselves that they need to get help for. So let me just tell a little story if I can. At the gym I go to, they have these fab little screens now on bikes and whatever it is that you go on. Not all of them, but so you can either watch TV, it's much more interesting than it used to be, or they give you like as if you're pedaling through the countryside or whatever it is, and so you're looking at scenery. And in my particular gym, they have this particular one where they go, I think pretty sure it's France, and they go through these old roads, and there aren't many people around, and everything's really, really close to the street. So you've got people must have been tiny in those days, because even the little bit of footpath is so narrow, I don't think I'd fit on it. And then this building, it's extraordinary. So you should just, when you're walking past, you are rubbing your shoulder against a building. And then it goes a bit further, and then you kind of into, I don't know whether they're shops or people's residences or a mixture of both. But it makes me really, really sad, makes me depressed, because clearly a lot of these little places in France are pretty unpopulated now, but the buildings are still there. So I actually Googled it and researched it, and it is true. And you kind of, your mind, as you're pedaling away, my mind goes through all these scenarios. So like, why would those places be emptied? Why would they not either be pulled? In Australia, you know, they'd be blown over, I can tell you, in a second if nobody was living in them anymore, because we have these pretty keen people who like to get rich on real estate. Won't go into that because I don't necessarily have good things to say about it. And you think, yeah, why haven't they been pulled down and modern things been or just made into parks or something, or, you know, if nobody's there, why aren't there people there and all of that stuff? And so what I've gleaned is that as I kind of suspected, a lot of these people were killed during the war by Nazis. So some people clearly were just dragged out of their houses and killed. Some people seem to have perhaps known that the Nazis were in their street and run for their lives and fled, in the middle of cups of tea and things like that. Children's toys left there. It's so unnerving and creepy and not just sad, it's tragic, And so there are these places and people have gone and filmed in them, and you think, oh, what is going on? And you just wonder about these people. Did they escape? Did they get away? Where did they go? They obviously didn't come back. So I suppose if you did escape, and I hope that they did, where would they go? Would they go to somewhere like Spain or Portugal? Just run until they got to some border or some other part of France, and perhaps they never had the money to go back. People even today in certain parts of the world that are so-called civilised live very frugally and lived very frugally, even in Australia, go back, and my gran, would eat the fat off the meat because she said you paid for it. I could never eat fat off meat. It just always revolted me. But people were just so, everything was just, every penny was counted, and so maybe they just never got back. There, you can find a place where there's somebody who obviously is the descendant of one of these families, and they have kept ownership of the place, and they've kind of modified and modernised the what's the word, fascia of the building, and made a little garage so they can drive down into it, and obviously you presume they've modified it inside, and because people won't live in those sort of cramped little conditions where you're literally just on the street anymore. And also there was another YouTube video where apparently people have made other more modern places, and they've just left these areas because they belong to somebody who is now who knows where, in another country. They've died, nobody knows. And so I gather that the government hasn't always done anything about this, and in other cases they have. And so it can become state land and then be sold on, but that takes a lot of, I think, probably paperwork and things. So you have this very, very, it's like, I suppose they're like ghost towns, in America or somewhere. And we have some places in Australia that are a bit like that used to have a whole lot of shacks and, wooden little buildings, and now it's just all grass. So things like that, those sort of stories that I was finding sad and trying to find a way to not think about them and not be sad, or find some other way of thinking about them that is not, doesn't get to me as much. And all those sorts of things, those kinds of thoughts were coming up in my mind at this time. And it's so if it helps anybody at all, you do have things pop up. And some of these you have to, like, the hammer that you have, the little babies have where they hammer the thing down. You have to do that with some of these thoughts, because they're not what you're thinking about right now. They're not what you're sad about right now. And it's not appropriate to be letting yourself get troubled by them right now. You have to just, okay, what is it right now that I do need to be sad about? That I have to find a way of getting through. Another little thing that, if it helps anybody, I remember when my grandfather died, and I was living with him at the time, and I'd never lived in a house with somebody who died before that. So it's very difficult, because I was seeing Granddad every day. He'd come out of this room and he'd go into that room, and and now again died. He died of an aneurysm and was gone in about less than 48 hours, I think. And so again, that was very, very difficult. And my grandfather was just somebody who was so active in our lives and was just such a caring person, and, you know, so big in spirit, and you couldn't imagine him ever being dead, you know. And he isn't dead. His spirit still lives on, of course, in heaven. He would go to heaven, I can tell you. Very good person. But I had to keep living there for now, because obviously they were going to go through my two aunts and my mother were going to have to sell the house and get their inheritance, which was fair enough, and then I was going to have to find somewhere else to live and do all of that. But for now, I had to live there. So I had to find a way of moving around the house. And the first morning I got up out of bed and I walked into the kitchen, and Granddad always did the dishes, all of them, every night. I don't do that. And there was a bunch of dishes on the sink that hadn't been done. And I just burst into hysterical crying because it was such a shock, because that was a sight you just never saw when Granddad was alive. And so I'm just standing there crying. And anyway, as time went by, like every room I went into, there was just sadness. And I had to find a way of it's a long time ago, of surviving this. So what I did was I said to myself, what if I was somebody else? I didn't know Granddad. I didn't know any of my family. What would I think walking into this house? And that's a big kitchen, and I went through all the different parts of the kitchen. Nice big window looking out over a very long backyard and so much garden, and what about this pantry? Such a big walk-in pantry. It's enormous and very old-fashioned, painted woodwork and kind of, quaint. And so I just taught myself to just be in somebody else's skin, as it were, to think about it as a complete stranger to the place, and see the kitchen as just a kitchen. The pantry is just a pantry. It doesn't have anything attached to it. All the different parts of the house, the lounge room, Granddad's bedroom, just a thing on its own. It's just a thing on its own. I remember when my aunt dingled her husband's car after he'd died, and she was just crying and crying and crying. She was so upset. And I had to sort of say to her too, in the end, this is just a car. This is not your husband. This is not, my uncle. This is his car. You have to detach it from him. So, haven't quite worked out how to do it at Mum and Dad's place yet. There's just too many things and it's just too overwhelming right now. Maybe part of me doesn't want to do that. I don't know. And I suppose I have done that because we've had so many people used to come into Mum and Dad's place over the many, many years that I've had to, look at it with other people's eyes in a way. But I hope that's of some help to somebody, and you might have already gone through this, you might be going through it now, or you might have to go through this one day. If you're not lucky enough to have died young, if I can put it that way. A lot of people would say the opposite, but there's some good things I think about dying young. You miss out on a lot of rottenness and awfulness, and go to heaven, and there you are, safe and sound. You got there. But if that's you're not in that happy state, then you probably just are going to be faced with this stuff one day. And time just does tick away. You hear old people say, oh, there's nobody my age anymore, they've all died. You think, oh, really? You're going to have to talk to people a bit younger than you. Talk to the people who are 5 years younger. Or, you know what, you might have to just talk to some teenagers and find out that some of them are just super duper great, But yeah, it is something I think that smacks us in the face. You might say, but you're 70 years old, Gemma. You know that time goes by. Yes, I do. But it's still something that you don't think about, and it comes up to smack you in the face now and again, and you kind of think, oh, wow, they're talking about cavemen on TV or something. You think, oh, there were people who lived all those years ago, and then they died, and then their kids have died, and then their kids have died, and that's gone on over and over and over. So much grief, so much sadness that this world, this planet Earth has seen. How have they all gotten through it? There's been so much violence, so much work of Satan in the earth. There's been, a lot of work of angels too, haven't they? Had to work hard in many, many situations, still having to do so with, the modern populations. So, tick, 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 it's just happening all the time. You look in the mirror and you think, oh, how did that happen? And you start, friends start talking about how, like a friend of mine is, she's 8 years older than I, and she's got something with a big, long name now. And she was so athletic and active and all of that, very, very physical person, and now she's got this arthritic condition. And so time ticking by has had to smack her in the face and say, you're not going to just stay young, you're going to get old, and eventually you're going to die. And, she's seen her parents go through death and all of that. And it's really something that is hard to get through. So if I can help you to encourage you to maybe prepare yourself for a little bit and, pray about it. Maybe pray a lot, because I think at these times we do need a lot of help, we need a lot of prayer, and we need a lot of friends. So I'd say make sure you've got those, please, and look after yourself. Hope you're not lonely at the moment, and hope you're well, and may God bless you abundantly. Bye for now.